The unveiling of the Dreadmore. The Galactic Council's grand arena was filled with dignitaries from every corner of the universe. They gathered to witness the latest demonstration of the Vucari Empire's military might. At the center of the arena, a massive creature, the Dreadmore, was tearing apart the Tsar's steer, showcasing its lethal prowess. The Vucari Emperor, Tyro the Merciless, reveled in the spectacle, his laughter echoing through the stands. "Behold, the Dreadmore," Tyro bellowed. "No beast is its equal. No army can withstand its charge. This creature shall lead our legions as we conquer the galaxy." The council members watched in horror as the Dreadmore, a beast of terrifying power, ripped its prey apart with savage glee. Its armored body, covered in thick scales and bulging muscles, seemed impervious to any attack. Venomous spittle dripped from its fangs, sizzling as it hit the sand. As Tyro continued to boast about the Dreadmore's invincibility, a sudden commotion drew everyone's attention. A fiery comet streaked across the sky, crashing into the stands with a deafening boom. As the dust settled, a small shuttle was revealed, battered but intact. The pilot, a human, emerged from the wreckage, wearing a tattered pressure suit and carrying a plasma rifle. The human, known as Ralph, strode toward the Dreadmore's cage, ignoring the warnings blaring over the loudspeakers and the guards aiming their rifles at him. The council members erupted in panicked chatter, unable to believe the audacity of this lone human. Ralph approached the Dreadmore, which had finished its meal and was now sniffing the air, sensing a new presence. The beast uncoiled to its full height, drool dripping from its fangs as it hissed at the intruder. Ralph reached for the cage's keypad, unfazed by the monster's threatening display. The Dreadmore lunged at the bars, its powerful body shaking the arena's walls. Ralph didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed a series of buttons, unlocking the cage. The council members gasped in horror, anticipating Ralph's gruesome end. The Dreadmore charged at Ralph, its scythe-like claws tearing up the sand. Ralph dived to the side just as the beast's jaws snapped shut where he had stood. He rolled to his feet and fired his plasma rifle at the Dreadmore, the bolt searing its scales but not penetrating. The Dreadmore turned with alarming agility, lunging at Ralph again. This time, Ralph stood his ground, waiting until the last possible moment before leaping forward, rolling beneath the beast, and coming up behind it. He drew a combat knife and plunged it into the Dreadmore's neck, seeking a weak spot in its armor. The knife sank deep, and purple ichor spurted from the wound. The beast screeched in pain and fury, thrashing wildly. Ralph clung to its back, holding on with one hand while he pulled a small device from his belt with the other. It was a pre-programmed slave circuit designed to override the Dreadmore's neural implants. With a desperate heave, Ralph slapped the device onto the Dreadmore's skull and pressed the activation switch. At first, nothing happened. The beast continued to thrash, but then its movements began to slow. Ralph felt a surge of foreign thoughts and emotions through the neural link. The Dreadmore's pain, rage, and memories of its harsh world. Ralph projected his own thoughts back, trying to communicate his empathy and understanding. "I know what it's like to have your life stolen from you," he muttered. "I know you want to make them pay, but this isn't the way. We can fight them together." Slowly, the Dreadmore's rage ebbed, replaced by a hesitant trust. The beast's growl softened, and it stopped trying to throw Ralph off. He patted its neck, whispering soothing words. The arena fell into stunned silence. Tyro, furious at the turn of events, ordered his guards to stand down, eager to see how long Ralph could last. Ralph and the Dreadmore had formed an unlikely bond, and together they stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Great Escape. The Dreadmore's newfound docility shocked the Galactic Council. Ralph, still perched on the beast's back, surveyed the chaos around him. Guards and dignitaries scrambled in panic, unsure of how to react. Tyro's face contorted with rage as he bellowed orders to his soldiers. "Seize them! Don't let that human escape! Ralph knew their time was running out. He urged the Dreadmore forward, directing it toward the arena's holding cells where prisoners were kept. The beast charged through the stands, scattering stone and bodies in its path. Guards opened fire, but their plasma bolts ricocheted harmlessly off the Dreadmore's armored hide. As they reached the holding cells, Ralph dismounted and addressed the terrified prisoners. "I'm here to get you out," he shouted. "Arm yourselves and stay close to me." The prisoners, a mix of humans and other alien species, grabbed weapons from fallen guards and formed a defensive line behind Ralph and the Dreadmore. Together, they fought their way through the arena, breaking through the ring of Vucari soldiers blocking their exit. Tyro watched in fury as his prized war beast and the human led the escape. His guards hesitated, unwilling to fire at the Dreadmore for fear of angering their emperor. The beast smashed through the gates, trampling guards and sentries as it barreled through the city streets. Alarms blared, and citizens fled in terror as the Dreadmore rampaged through marketplaces and residential districts. Ralph maintained a neural link with the beast, guiding its movements and calming its rage. The escapees followed closely, firing at Vucari soldiers who pursued them. At last, they reached the city's outskirts, where a small shuttle awaited them. Ralph directed the Dreadmore to guard the entrance while the prisoners boarded. He knew their fight was far from over, but for now, they had a chance at freedom. As the shuttle lifted off, Ralph looked down at the city, now a battlefield. He felt a surge of determination. They had escaped, but the real battle lay ahead. The Vucari Empire would not rest until they were recaptured or destroyed. Ralph turned to the prisoners, now his comrades in arms. "We're not just running," he said. "We're going to fight. We're going to show the galaxy what it means to be human." The shuttle sped away, carrying its precious cargo of hope and defiance. The Galactic Council had witnessed the impossible, a human taming the universe's most dangerous creature, and this was just the beginning. The resistance grows. The escapees found refuge in a hidden base on a remote moon. It was a makeshift camp, but it provided shelter and a place to regroup. Ralph and the Dreadmore had become symbols of resistance, inspiring others to join their cause. News of their daring escape spread quickly, and soon they were joined by more rebels, humans, Kellians, Zaan mercenaries, and other species oppressed by the Vucari Empire. The base buzzed with activity as they prepared for the inevitable retaliation. Ralph spent his days training new recruits, forging them into a fighting force capable of standing up to the Vucari. He shared his bond with the Dreadmore, teaching them how to communicate with the beast and harness its power. One evening, as Ralph stood on a ridge overlooking the camp, a familiar voice crackled in his helmet comm. "Ralph, it's Adrena. We've got intel on a Vucari supply convoy heading our way. It's heavily guarded, but if we can intercept it, we'll gain much-needed resources." Adrena was a Kellan resistance leader who had become Ralph's trusted ally. Together, they had orchestrated several successful raids against the Vucari, striking at their supply lines and weakening their grip on the galaxy. Ralph nodded, a determined look in his eyes. "We'll be ready. Let's show them what we're made of." The next morning, they set out, the Dreadmore leading the charge. The convoy was heavily armed, but the rebels were prepared. They launched a surprise attack, catching the Vucari off guard. Plasma fire lit up the sky as the two sides clashed. The Dreadmore tore through the enemy ranks, its claws and fangs a blur of lethal motion. Ralph, riding atop the beast, fired his plasma rifle with deadly precision. The rebels fought with fierce determination, their morale bolstered by the presence of their unstoppable leader. After a brutal battle, the convoy was theirs. They captured weapons, food, and medical supplies, everything they needed to sustain their fight. The victory was a significant boost for the resistance, proving that they could stand up to the might of the Vucari Empire. Back at the base, the mood was jubilant. The rebels celebrated their victory, but Ralph knew they couldn't afford to rest. The Vucari would strike back with even greater force. They needed to stay one step ahead, to be ready for whatever came next. As he looked around at the faces of his comrades, Ralph felt a deep sense of pride. They had come together from different worlds, different species, united by a common goal. The bond they shared was unbreakable, forged in the fires of battle, and tempered by their shared determination. The fight for freedom was far from over, but they were ready. With the Dreadmore at their side, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would show the galaxy that the spirit of resistance could not be crushed. The Vucari strike back. The Vucari Empire was reeling from the loss of their supply convoy. Tyro the Merciless was livid, his fury echoing through the halls of the Vucari palace. He summoned his most trusted generals, demanding a swift and decisive retaliation. "We will not be humiliated by a handful of rebels and their pet beast," Tyro roared. "Crush them. Leave no stone unturned until Ralph and his resistance are obliterated." The Vucari forces mobilized, launching a massive offensive against the rebels' moonbase. Warships darkened the sky as they descended, their engines humming with lethal intent. The rebels had prepared for this moment, but they knew the odds were against them. Ralph and the Dreadmore stood at the forefront, rallying their forces. "This is it," Ralph said, his voice carrying over the noise of the approaching enemy. "We fight for our freedom, for our future. Stand strong, and we will prevail." The battle was fierce and chaotic. Plasma bolts and explosions filled the air as the rebels fought valiantly against the Vucari onslaught. The Dreadmore was a whirlwind of destruction, its claws and teeth tearing through enemy ranks. Despite their bravery, the rebels were outnumbered and outgunned. The Vucari's advanced technology and sheer numbers began to overwhelm them. Ralph fought with everything he had, but he knew they couldn't hold out much longer. In a desperate bid to turn the tide, Ralph made a bold decision. He ordered the Dreadmore to break through the enemy lines and attack the Vucari command center. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. The Dreadmore charged through the battlefield, smashing aside Vucari soldiers and war machines. Ralph clung to its back, firing his plasma rifle with deadly accuracy. They reached the command center, a heavily fortified structure at the heart of the Vucari forces. With a deafening roar, the Dreadmore smashed through the gates, tearing into the enemy command. Ralph leaped off its back, his plasma rifle blazing as he fought his way to the control room. Inside, he found Tyro the Merciless, flanked by his elite guards. "You've caused enough trouble, human," Tyro snarled. "This ends now." Ralph raised his rifle, aiming it at Tyro. "It ends when you and your empire are no more." The two clashed in a fierce battle, plasma bolts and blades flashing. Ralph fought with a determination born of desperation, knowing that the fate of the resistance rested on his shoulders. Tyro was a formidable opponent, but Ralph's resolve was unbreakable. In a final, desperate move, Ralph managed to disable Tyro's guards and corner the Emperor. "Surrender," Ralph demanded. "Your reign of terror is over." Tyro laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "You think you've won. The Vucari will never surrender. We will hunt you down to the ends of the galaxy." Ralph's eyes hardened. "Then we'll keep fighting. We'll never give up." With a swift motion, Ralph knocked Tyro unconscious and signaled the Dreadmore. Together, they fought their way out of the command center, leaving chaos in their wake. The Vucari forces, now leaderless, began to falter. The rebels seized the moment, rallying and pushing back against their oppressors. The tide of battle turned, and soon the Vucari were in full retreat. The day was won, but Ralph knew this was just one battle in a long and arduous war. As the dust settled, Ralph looked at the Dreadmore, its fierce eyes meeting his. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. The bond between them was stronger than ever, a symbol of the unyielding spirit of the resistance. They had struck a significant blow against the Vucari Empire, but the fight was far from over. Ralph and the Dreadmore would continue to lead the resistance, inspiring hope and defiance in the face of tyranny. Together, they would forge a new path, one where freedom and justice prevailed. Allies from the shadows. The victory against the Vucari command center brought a brief respite to the rebels. They regrouped at their moon base, tending to their wounded and preparing for the next inevitable assault. Ralph knew they needed more than just brute force to win this war. They needed allies. Adrena approached Ralph one evening, her expression grave. "Ralph, we have a lead on potential allies. There's a faction of Vucari dissidents who oppose Tyro's regime. They might be willing to join us." Ralph nodded, understanding the importance of this opportunity. "Let's reach out to them. We need all the help we can get." A covered meeting was arranged on a neutral asteroid, far from prying eyes. Ralph and a small delegation, including Adrena and the Dreadmore, traveled to the rendezvous point. The atmosphere was tense, both sides wary of betrayal. The leader of the dissidents, a scared female Vucari named Zala, greeted them. Her eyes were cold but calculating. "We have a common enemy, human. Tyro's tyranny must end." Ralph nodded. "We share that goal. Together, we can bring down the Vucari Empire and build a future where all species are free." Zala studied Ralph for a moment before nodding. "Very well. We will join forces. But know this. If you betray us, there will be no mercy." Ralph met her gaze evenly. "We fight for freedom, not for power. You have my word." With the alliance forged, the rebels gained valuable resources and intelligence. The dissidents had insider knowledge of the Vucari's weaknesses and strategies, information that could turn the tide of the war. Back at the moon base, the combined forces began to plan their next move. They identified key Vucari strongholds and supply lines, preparing for a series of coordinated attacks. The rebels trained tirelessly, honing their skills and building trust between the diverse factions. As they worked together, Ralph and the Dreadmore became a symbol of unity. The sight of the human and the beast, once enemies, now fighting side by side, inspired hope and determination among the rebels. The first major operation was a strike against a Vucari weapons facility. The dissidents provided detailed schematics and security protocols, allowing the rebels to plan a precise and devastating attack. The Dreadmore led the charge, its fierce presence a beacon of strength. The battle was fierce, but the rebels' preparation and unity paid off. They overwhelmed the Vucari defenses, capturing the facility and seizing a vast cache of weapons. It was a significant victory, bolstering their morale and crippling the enemy's war effort. As they celebrated their success, Ralph couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism. They had allies, resources, and a growing momentum. The Vucari Empire was beginning to crack under the pressure, and the dream of freedom seemed within reach. But Ralph knew they couldn't afford to be complacent. The Vucari would strike back with a vengeance, and they needed to stay one step ahead. The alliance with the dissidents was fragile, built on mutual necessity rather than trust. He looked at the Dreadmore, its eyes reflecting a shared resolve. They had come a long way together, and there was still much further to go. The fight for freedom was far from over, but with each victory, they moved closer to their goal. As the rebels prepared for their next mission, Ralph felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were fighting for something greater than themselves, for a future where all beings could live free from oppression. And with the Dreadmore by his side, he knew they would not falter. The betrayal. The alliance with the Vucari dissidents had brought new strength to the rebels, but it also came with unforeseen risks. As their combined forces launched successful attacks on Vucari strongholds, cracks began to show in the uneasy partnership. Zala, the leader of the dissidents, was a shrewd and ambitious strategist. While she despised Tyro's regime, her ultimate goals were unclear. Ralph sensed that her loyalty to the cause of freedom might not be as unwavering as she claimed. One night, as Ralph was reviewing battle plans with Adrena, an urgent message came through. "Ralph, you need to see this," a young rebel soldier said, his face pale with worry. Ralph followed the soldier to the communication room, where a decrypted transmission was displayed on the screen. It was a message from Zala to an unknown recipient, discussing plans to seize control of the resistance once Tyro was defeated. Adrena's eyes widened in shock. She's planning to betray us. She's using us to weaken Tyro. And then she'll take over. Ralph's jaw tightened. We can't let that happen. We need to confront her, but we have to be careful. If we handle this wrong, it could tear the alliance apart. They devised a plan to expose Zala's treachery without causing a rift among the rebels. The next day, Ralph called a meeting with the leaders of the dissidents and the resistance. He presented the evidence of Zala's betrayal, her plans laid bare for all to see. Zala denied the accusations vehemently, but the evidence was damning. Her own followers, disillusioned and angry, turned against her. She was taken into custody, her fate to be decided by a tribunal of both human and Vucari leaders. The betrayal was a blow to the rebels, but it also strengthened their resolve. They had rooted out a potential threat and reaffirmed their commitment to their shared cause. The alliance was now built on a foundation of trust and transparency. With Zala out of the picture, a new leader emerged among the dissidents. Varric, a seasoned warrior who had fought against Tyro's regime for years. Unlike Zala, Varric was genuinely committed to the cause of freedom and quickly gained the respect of the rebels. Under Varric's leadership, the alliance grew stronger. The dissidents and the rebels worked together seamlessly, launching coordinated strikes against the Vucari. The Dreadmore continued to be a symbol of their unity, its presence inspiring courage and determination. The final push came with the plan to liberate a major Vucari-controlled city. It was a daunting task, but the rebels were determined. They used their combined knowledge and resources to plan a multi-pronged assault, targeting key infrastructure and military installations. The battle for the city was intense. The Dreadmore led the charge, its ferocity unmatched as it tore through enemy lines. Ralph, Adrena, and Varric coordinated their forces, directing the flow of the battle with precision. As the sun set on the city, the rebels stood victorious. The Vucari forces had been driven out, and the citizens welcomed their liberators with open arms. It was a moment of triumph, a symbol of what they could achieve together. Ralph looked around at the diverse faces of his comrades, humans, Vucari dissidents, and other species who had joined their cause. They had fought side by side, united by their shared dream of freedom. The road ahead was still long, but they had proven that they could overcome any obstacle together. The betrayal had tested their resolve, but it had also strengthened their unity. They had emerged from the ordeal more determined than ever to bring down the Vucari Empire and build a future where all beings could live in peace. As the rebels celebrated their victory, Ralph felt a deep sense of hope. They had come so far, and there was no turning back. With the Dreadmore at their side and the bonds they had forged, they would continue to fight until the galaxy was free. The final stand. The liberation of the city marked a turning point in the war against the Vucari Empire. The rebels had gained significant ground, and their momentum seemed unstoppable. But Tyro the Merciless was not one to admit defeat easily. He rallied his remaining forces for a final desperate stand. The Galactic Council, now fully aware of the rebels' strength and determination, offered their support. They provided advanced weaponry, medical supplies, and tactical advisors to aid in the final assault on the Vucari capital. The council members had seen the undeniable proof of humanity's resilience and the power of their alliance with the Dreadmore. Ralph stood before his assembled forces, a diverse army of humans, Vucari dissidents, and warriors from countless other species. "This is it," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "The final battle. We fight not just for ourselves, but for every being oppressed by the Vucari. We fight for freedom." The rebels roared in approval, their spirits lifted by Ralph's words. The Dreadmore, now fully healed from its previous battles, stood ready at Ralph's side. Its fierce eyes glowed with a determination that mirrored Ralph's own. The assault on the Vucari capital was a coordinated effort, with the Galactic Council's fleet providing air support while the rebels launched a ground invasion. The city's defenses were formidable, but the rebels were prepared. They had the element of surprise and the advantage of unity. The battle was fierce and relentless. The Vucari fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, but the rebels pressed on, their resolve unbreakable. The Dreadmore tore through enemy lines, its powerful claws and teeth leaving destruction in its wake. Ralph led the charge, his plasma rifle blazing as he cut down Vucari soldiers. Beside him, Adrena and Varric coordinated their forces, directing the flow of the battle with expert precision. The rebels moved as one, their unity and determination propelling them forward. As they fought their way through the city, Ralph and the Dreadmore reached the heart of the Vucari stronghold. Tyro's palace, the grand structure, loomed before them, its walls fortified and guarded by Tyro's elite soldiers. Ralph took a deep breath, steeling himself for the final confrontation. "This ends here," he said, his voice filled with determination. "For the Dreadmore, for our fallen comrades, and for the future of the galaxy." The Dreadmore roared in agreement, its powerful voice echoing through the palace grounds. They charged forward, breaking through the defenses and storming the palace. Inside, they found Tyro waiting, his face a mask of fury and desperation. "You think you can defeat me?" Tyro sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "I am the ruler of the Vucari Empire. I will not be brought down by a human and his pet beast." Ralph raised his plasma rifle, aiming it at Tyro. "Your reign of terror ends now, Tyro. The galaxy will be free from your tyranny." The battle was intense, with Tyro using every trick at his disposal to try and defeat Ralph and the Dreadmore. But Ralph's resolve was unbreakable, and the bond between him and the Dreadmore gave them the strength they needed. In the end, Ralph's determination and the Dreadmore's ferocity proved too much for Tyro. The Emperor fell, his body crumpling to the ground. The palace fell silent as the rebels realized that they had won. Ralph stood over Tyro's fallen form, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The battle was over, but the war had left its mark on him. He looked around at his comrades, their faces filled with relief and triumph. The rebels had done the impossible. They had brought down the Vucari Empire and freed the galaxy from its grip. The Dreadmore, standing tall and proud, was a testament to their unity and strength. As the Galactic Council members arrived to congratulate them, Ralph felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had fought for something greater than themselves and had emerged victorious. The galaxy was now free, and a new era of peace and cooperation could begin. Ralph looked at the Dreadmore, its eyes reflecting his own determination. They had come a long way together, and there was still much work to be done. But for now, they could rest, knowing that they had made a difference. The struggle had been long and arduous, but they had prevailed. The future was bright, and the bonds they had forged would ensure that the galaxy remained free from oppression. Ralph and the Dreadmore would continue to fight for justice and peace, standing as symbols of hope and resilience.